The California story has many chapters. It's a story of icons, of imagination, and challenging the status quo. A story you'll find at the Oakland Museum of California. The story of California, the story of you.
Good news in Oakland! Oh yeah, it feels great.
Good news in Oakland, reporting from the Kaiser Center at the 2010 Mayoral Candidates Forum, hosted by the Oakland Chamber of Commerce, League of Women Voters, and the Bay Area Business Roundtable with Mayoral Candidate Mr. Joe Tuman. Joe, welcome to Good News in Oakland. It's a pleasure to have you.
Always nice to see you. Thank you. And good news from Oakland.
Joe, unfortunately, although we've got a lot of good news, there are tax deficiencies, audit deficiencies, corruption, budget crises, all bad news. How can we trust you as mayor to lead this city into some good news?
Well, the first thing you have to understand about me is that I'm a very serious person, and if I tell you I'm going to do something, I always keep my word. So what I'll tell you now, in terms of trusting me, is I'll start in November, right after the election, with a top-to-bottom audit of the mayor's office and then the city administrator's office, and from there move into December and January. It'll take about 3 months to do a top-to-bottom audit, independent of what I would have Courtney Ruby do as well. From that, I'll make decisions early in January about what replacements preliminarily I need to make and what kind of cuts we need to make in spending in order to cut the deficit. But to be honest with you, the way you're going to have leadership in this city is that the next mayor is going to have to sit down with all the labor groups and close the gap together. My father always said that when you make a hard decision, if everybody's mad at you, you probably made the right decision, right? And we will share the pain. And by the way, I will take the first cut. Mayor Dellums gave himself a $67,000 raise. I'll give it back. If I'm going to ask everybody else to help me close that first deficit, I have to take the first step, and it'll be bigger than everybody else's. By the way, bigger than Gene's 25%, right? He gave himself a 60% raise. I'm giving it back.
Now, Joe, that all sounds good. And we know that there's some positive things happening. But how will you use, what media strategy will you use to get the good news out and support local entities like Good News in Oakland who really push the good news story?
Oh, yeah. Well, listen, a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to address crime immediately, try and put more officers back on the street, because I want to change the narrative of the city away from we have public safety problems, there's too much crime. And I'm actually going to use my experience as a broadcaster, somebody like you, to start talking about the things, not change the subject, but just also remind broadcasters outside of Good News in Oakland that there are actually other stories we can tell about this city in addition to talking about crime, which emphasize what's positive about here. You know, we have somebody living in the city, for example, who's 116 years old. Do you know that we have one of the founding members, a woman who's a choreographer, one of the original choreographers for the Alvin Ailey dance troupe? Do you know that we have a man named Ishmael Reed living in the city who was my mentor at Berkeley as a writer? He's a MacArthur Genius Grant winner. We have lots of individuals like this. We don't have to talk about Ricky Henderson or Clint Eastwood. We have lots and lots of people, and they all have stories. And every story has a human face like this, which humanizes our city. We can talk about our proximity, our weather, and the rest of it, but frankly, I like to talk about people. And there are lots of wonderful people in this city. I will emphasize the positive as we begin to talk about Oakland in a different way. This city can enjoy a renaissance just like Brooklyn has back east and just like other cities have that have always lived in the shadow of bigger cities. I think it's time to celebrate what's unique about Oakland and stop worrying about what San Francisco thinks.
Let's celebrate, Joe. Thank you so much for being on Good News in Oakland.
It's always my pleasure. Good news in Oakland.
The California story has many chapters. It's a story of icons, of imagination, and challenging the status quo. A story you'll find at the Oakland Museum of California. The story of California, the story of you.
Good news in Oakland! Oh yeah, it feels great.